I've been licensed for a number of years. I actually got my real estate license when I was 18. And in the process of that, my family obviously was in real estate and encouraged me to get that license, because there's not too many high schoolers that say, oh, let me go get my real estate license and check this thing out. So it's an interesting ride from there, because as I grew up through that real estate industry and kind of morphed into a number of different things, from sitting at the kitchen table, cold calling, which is, a lot of people today don't do that cold calling, but I love to cold call. Just give me a list. I'll have my own script. Give me the phone numbers and I'll just start dialing away. And that's what I started, that's how I got into this business, was cold calling. But we didn't have data back then. I mean, what we had was, hey, here's a list of directories, and this is 2002. And here's, DNC wasn't as big as it is now, but you could go through a list and get some appointments. And I got cussed out the first night, and I got a listing appointment for $400,000. So, I said, this works. This is interesting. And we dialed Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m. And it was a great thing. So kind of fast forwarding through that, I've done a number of things, and the reason that my transaction count was able to get so high is because in 2008, I started selling properties for large banks. So Fannie Mae, other large institutions out there. We started to handle their REO inventory. And very quickly, I realized that this was a massive opportunity for our company and what we could do with this real estate inventory, and how we could do it differently, and how we could apply technology and data and systems and processes. Because the core of anybody's real estate business, as I'm sure the practitioners in this room know, it's systems and processes. You have a way of how you generate leads, you have a way of how you handle those customers, and then you have a way of how you get more business out of those customers and generate new business in this constant cycle. And it's all about generating that business. So in 2008, we figured out that if we applied systems and processes to this, we could revolutionize the industry. And what we did is I said, okay, I'm going to stay in the office, and then I'm going to team up with other agents, and I'm going to have those agents out in the field. And the next thing you know, we went from 16 properties to 100 properties, to 200 properties, to 500 properties, and over 1,000 properties that were being managed. And everybody was like, how did you do that? And I said, I built technology. So we built technology that managed all of this processes internal, nothing off the shelf. And we built all this technology in-house, and we utilized it in-house. And it was a game changer for us, because the competition didn't see it coming. The competition did not understand how I was able to earn all this business, and was all performance-based. That we did the right thing, we handled the properties right, we got the maximum amount of money for the bank, and they just kept rolling them on through. And then ended up selling, basically in the United States, a property in every single time zone across the US, and huge geographies, including Montana. So you're close by there. How can we evolve into kind of where we can bring some of this technology and bring some of these data points? Because we started collecting a lot of data. I started seeing a lot of things, trending. And I said, wait a second, I'm seeing certain consistencies amongst the owners of these properties. I'm seeing certain consistencies amongst the occupants of these properties, and those that stay, those that take the money and leave, and then those that put up that fight real hard in the legal system. So there's got to be points here that we can start making all of this make sense. And really just starting putting all that together and saying, okay, how can we do something with all of this different data? So kind of fast forwarding just a little bit, this is a picture of me and some of our other teammates. This was right after we ran a Tough Mudder. It was 11 miles. I pulled my shoulder. I was out of commission for a very long time. We trained for it, but I'm going to tell you right now that they are 100% correct when they say that thing is very tough. I was walking there towards the end, but I mean, it was an experience. It's a great team building experience. You'd be surprised about how you can actually finish that if you put your mind to it. But that's myself there in the back, along with a few of our other co-founders. And right now, we have a real estate team that's still active in production. So if anybody is like Keller Williams or anything, it's a 7th level team, to where one of our business partners, his wife, manages that team 100% of the time. And in the Washington, D.C. area, which is where we're from, they'll do over 400 transactions this year alone for a little over 100 million in sales. And that's completely independent of everything else that's going on in our world right now. But again, it's systems, it's processes in the real estate community to keep that churn going. and keep that business going and growing. So with the team that we have today, how did we build that real estate team? How did we get that real estate team to be as performant as it is? How did we get that level of success without doing the traditional things such as cold calling, Facebook ads, Instagram? So we built Remind. And this program, as you'll see today here, is an accumulation of big data. And we'll talk about what big data is for the real estate world and community as I've seen it applied, and some of the really neat things that you can extrapolate out of just about 5 or 6 different data points on a property, irrespective of knowing anything about the person that lives inside the property, or irrespective of anything about the person that owns that property. So it's pretty interesting. But with that being said, it's always best kind of just to kind of showcase what things are. And then this is Remind. So basically, it's a property-centric database that as soon as you log in, you see property here, and you see the property that you're looking for. And now earlier they were mentioning something about layering data upon data layer. So somebody mentioned something about building permits. So immediately right here, for example, you can see the building permit. You can see what the building permit was involved when it was pulled. You can see all that information. Shane's like, I'm going to kill you. But also, too, you can see other icons on there. And what those icons are representing is just additional data points and data layers. Like, for example, it's showing who paid cash when they bought their property. It's showing icons of who owns other real estate nearby, so you can find multi-transactional buyers. We do a lot of heat map visualization so that you can see the time frame of ownership inside of a community. And then that way, you can see all sorts of neat things as it relates to the makeup of the community. This is a neat visualization. These bar graphs are actually representing how many people live inside those properties. Because in the United States, this thing called privacy doesn't exist. Whatever people want to think there's privacy, there's not. So we actually know who's living inside that property 18 years and older inside, and we visualize it for the agents. So they can market to those millennials, they can market to those renters. Absentee owners, right? So you see a visualization here very quickly showing you absentee owners, and of course, things such as zoning information. And even another neat little visualization where we can actually visualize opportunity as it relates to the potential sale of a property. So real quick here, as an agent, the system's telling you to focus on a couple of properties for marketing, and we'll go into how the big data tells us this information here very quickly. But the beautiful thing about all of this is we don't make you leave your MLS environment, because this is in your MLS. In the United States, realtors get access to this only through their MLS. They log in with their MLS. They see their MLS properties here, and they can go through and they can click on information, and they can see those MLS properties as it relates. So they can see all the property information. They can see all that MLS details. And again, it's just layering data layer upon data layer of what's available out there, and even allowing them to visualize data in ways that you've never been able to visualize it before. Like, for example, here seeing an agent's production, seeing this agent's most recent listing, and then each dot on that map there is the agent's previous transactions. So real quickly, we just went click, click, click. We went right down all this data. We went to MLS data, we went to property data, we went to consumer data. We went to a property here, for example. Click on this property, we can see information on this property. We can see all their mortgage information, do amortization, see demographics here about the community. And even in the US, I can get you all their contact information. I can get you their cell phone numbers. I can get you their email addresses. Then I can take those email addresses and then I go find their social media accounts, their Facebook, their Twitter, their LinkedIn. We have over 580 million email addresses, or 580 million phone numbers, and we can just connect it very quickly. So it's bringing in this aspect of, what is big data, right? And just like the cartoon slide showcased earlier, big data can mean a lot of different things. It can mean sensor data, right? So in the oil and gas industry here, big data is huge because they'll put all these sensors on the oil pipelines, they'll put all these oil sensors on the big rigs, and then they'll take samples every 5 milliseconds, and they'll just ingest all this data, and they'll predict when there's going to be a problem with any of the equipment. using all sorts of algorithms so that they can get maintenance done so that the equipment's not down and it continues to make money. Big data to GE means different things. GE makes turbofans for jetliners, and amongst other things, of course. But when it comes to a jet engine, when I flew from Washington, D.C. out here to Calgary on a Boeing, that generated per engine 1 terabyte of sensor data just on that flight alone. And just think about how many times that plane is being circled and churned. That's big data, real big data, like petabytes of data. I spoke with the chief data officer for eBay at a conference, and they generate just insane amounts of data in what they do. Now, how does that apply, though, to our real estate industry? What does that mean for us as practitioners, and how can we learn from this big data? How can we bring big data into our industry and then use that data to do more transactions and earn more revenue as agents? Because that's what we're all here for. This is our business. This was my business. I put food on the table and paid for the roof over my head by getting listings, taking out buyers, and selling properties. The same thing that we're all doing. And it starts with this, like a community here. And this is a picture just representative of any community, nothing special about it, no trick questions. But just imagine if you're able to, on a map, as you saw earlier inside Remind, you can go to any single property there and pull up all of the data points, over 150 data points on those properties. So you can then ingest that data. We can then understand that data and say, okay, where as agents do you need to focus? What happens if you have a buyer that wants to be in this community because it has the best schools, because it has the best commute time, but there's nothing on the market? Where do you start? And that's where big data really can come in, because we can churn all these different attributes on. All I need to know for that example is just give me the time frame they bought it. And then we visualize the data, because as humans, we prefer visualizations. There's a reason that I'm showing you a picture of a community and I'm not showing you 65 bullet points, because everybody in this room is going to appreciate this visual a lot more than death by PowerPoint. So we're visual by nature, and by when you display that data in a visual way and you interpret that data, that's what creates that actionable intelligence, that actionable insight as it relates to big data. So with that being said, what about the occupants of that house, right? That's where obviously in the Canadian market it gets a little different, because back in the U.S. we would know that family has the number of children that they have. We would know the age ranges of their children, so we can ping off of life events. We're even in the process right now of adding in a data set to identify prenatal, natal, and postnatal events in families, because that's the type of information that exists out there. Because earlier you saw in the video that they showed on big data, and they talked about your Facebook and Instagram account and your Twitter account. I'm sure everybody in this room has at least one of those, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And how many in this room post photos up to their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram? And you all don't even have to raise your hands, because we know what the truth is. There's probably some of you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram right now. And the beautiful part about that is that when you take a picture, you go to Tim Hortons and you take that picture of the coffee you just got and you upload it to Twitter because you're on your way to work. I can see your latitude, longitude off of that picture. Twitter gives this out, just so you know, right? You actually have to go into your settings and you have to tell it not to provide that when you upload those pictures. So if you're the type of social maven where you'll take a picture of that there in the morning getting your coffee, you'll take a picture dropping the kids off at school, and then you'll take a picture as soon as you get to the office, I could download those 3 pictures. I can put it into various technologies that already exist, just so you know, and I could literally get an estimate of where you will be in your day, so I can intercept you if I wanted to, and I can probably find out within about a mile of where you live. And you just gave it to me for free. So that's big data that is being used right now by many different folks and institutions. But that social media aspect, most people stop there and say that's where opportunity in big data, they think about that. But big data is just so much more. It's those other data sets, like they were talking about the transportation data set. They're talking about, bike trails, recreation, layering those data sets and really understanding what that means. And so now I'm going to get technical here. So don't get scared, but I'll explain what all this jibber jabber means. So what we can do with this data is we can ingest all of these data points And you saw it earlier there on our screen of how we're able to look at opportunities. And really what that opportunity is a prediction of when that home is going to sell. Not because in this example here, we're not using data that is specific to a person. This is all property data. This is ownership time frame, amongst other about 6 or 7 different variables and attributes. Then we ingest all that data, we run it on our algorithms on it in the cloud, and we spit out a result. And this is what's called a confusion matrix, not because it's meant to confuse you, but it's meant to kind of display what's going on. So very quickly, the text there on the left and the graph on the right are pretty much the same thing, just one graphical versus the other. But this was run on just a sample in Maricopa in the area in Phoenix, where we were just doing our demo there real quick. And what this is showing here is that the computer's saying that we're going to predict certain number of properties in this sample set will sell in a 0 to 6 month time frame. Then we go and we say, okay, let's prove it. That's the reference. So then we go back to those transactions and we say, how accurate was it? So now we see here that it had great accuracy in that 0 to 6 month time frame. And then if you notice there goes prediction, you can see again what we expected there on the left-hand side and what actually happened there on the top. Nothing's perfect, of course. But what the idea here is that we're looking at 93.8% accuracy off of real data, predicting when the sale is going to occur in a month, in a binned month time frame. So 0 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18, 19 to 24, and then 25 plus. Obviously, the largest number is in 25 plus because we all know some various stats about how often homes are trading out there. But by ingesting this data and by utilizing this data with our data scientists, we're able to use these algorithms and techniques to actually show practitioners of how they can see big data in action and how it's going to bring value to their business. Because again, I can talk about theories, I can talk about what's coming around the pike, but it's all about, at the end of the day, how can these practitioners, right? Practitioners like myself, practitioners like you, actually use this data to then do more transactions and earn more revenue as agents. Because unless there's a revenue opportunity for you guys as agents out there as practitioners, then all this big data is just a bunch of noise. And then this is one of the key aspects, not just the visualization, but being able to ingest that big data, being able to ingest those attributes, and then say what we can do with this and show that. Now here's another interesting visualization. A little harder to see up there given the size, but what this is showing us is in the US, we have a file, think about that, we have a file on 260 million adults in the United States. In that file, that we update every 30 days, we have what are called persistent IDs. So in these persistent IDs, we're able to actually track if you move from North Dakota to Montana. And we can actually see you move. Doesn't matter if you own, doesn't matter if you rent, doesn't matter if you, whatever, if you exist and you're in our database and then you move, we will follow you. So think about that. And what's interesting here is we can actually track the path of migrations as folks move from one state or to another. And what this is showing here is basically saying, okay, for Oregon, most people that moved out of Oregon moved over to Idaho. And then you can look at some of the other interesting things that can come out of that as well. Because again, there's certain applications for this as an industry. So to understanding, are folks moving out of your town? Are folks moving into your town, right? With this data at your fingertips, you can make informed decisions. And again, you don't have to be a statistician. You don't have to be a data scientist, because all this data, we crunch it, we visualize it, and then we show you that end result there so that you can understand where it's going. Everybody is just so quiet right now. They're like, this is scary. It's interesting though. It's interesting. So what does big data do in terms of the real estate? We're able to identify the ownership. We're able to identify the mortgage time frame. We're able to identify with that information payments. We're able to identify, all the social media and the contact points, but we're able to bring out this 360-degree picture of not just the homeowner, but also to the occupant. And that's a big distinction, is that was never done before, especially in our real estate industry, even though the data existed. As we said earlier, the footprint that one leaves as they go across the internet is incredible. I mean, I'm already on my phone here, and it's already picked up my geolocation, and now I'm seeing targeted advertisements for various sales and stuff here in Calgary. So, there's a lot of information that's exchanged constantly, and there's a ton of information that how it brings it back into the real estate industry. So, real quick, let's touch on something here as well. We can kind of talk about big data, and we talk about that property, the community there. Big data is not just about that property attributes. Big data can be related also to data sets. So for example, some of the neat stuff that we're looking into is the ability to gauge social sentiment off of a community. So imagine if you're logged into a program and you want to know what's going on, what people think about a community, just drag your cursor over this particular community, and then we'll show you what the sentiment, given the Facebook, Twitter, and various other traffic, is saying about that community. Because again, we're very social creatures by nature. We talk a lot to others, but at the same time, it's not necessarily as easy to get that social sentiment unless you have a platform to be able to access it. Another thing here when it comes to communities is let's talk about layering in other data attributes. What about energy consumption, right? So we go away from, some of the other aspects of it, but what about energy consumption when we talk about how energy efficient are these homes? You have smart meters that are coming out nonstop right now and getting replaced on these properties that, along with solar, you can do so many things with a smart home enabled environment. Especially any home that is a smart home enabled property is transmitting tons of data back onto what's going on with inside that property. I mean, how many people in this room have a Nest thermostat? Okay, okay. So all your stuff is transmitted to Google, and Google knows a ton about you. So that's one of the reasons why they bought Nest, is just think about this. If Google knows more about your location day in and day out, if they know when you come home, when you leave home, when you set even the temperature inside the property, then they can use that information to better target ad sales to you as an individual, because again, that data, that personal data is ingested by them, and then they use that to create this ubiquitous derivative, which we'll talk about that in a second, so that then those advertisements can be better targeted to you. So imagine in a newer community where nests are going to be more prevalent, just imagine all the data that's being generated constantly, right? So there's just so many different applications about where these data sets are growing out to. So, and that was a great topic about those derivatives. Is the derivative is going to be kind of the next thing I think any country is going to have to deal with on a privacy standpoint, whether it's the U.S., whether it's Canada. The derivative is going to be kind of the next issue that we see come up, because out of all of this big data, for example, if we go back to this picture of the family, in the U.S., I know about the children, I know their age ranges, I know the income, I know the wealth, I know if they drive a luxury SUV, I know if they drive a pickup truck, I know their education. By the way, this is all, people provide you this information just all over the place. But the thing about it is that's still considered personally identifiable information. We still have some rules in the US, and we cannot display that personally identifiable information. So what we do is we create a derivative, right? What you saw earlier on this screen here is the result of a derivative. This is a derivative. The derivative is an end result that masks the initial data that's ingested in to produce it. And derivatives are, for our industry, especially for the real estate industry, is where a lot of things are going to be going, because certain data points are confidential, certain data points cannot be known, certain data points cannot be shared, but what we can do with those data points is internally, in a secure environment, ingest this data in and create these derivatives. And these derivatives allow us to then display it back to the agents and so that you guys as practitioners can get that actionable intelligence off of it and be able to figure out, okay, how can I do more in this particular community? Where should I target my opportunities for listings? Where should I target my marketing for buyers? And those derivatives are going to be, I think, the more hotly contested here in the future because of just of how that they're put together. And it's because you take these algorithms and you take these data points, and what we end up is an end result here that you see, not those individual data points on the family or on the consumer. Back to the family here in this example, there's a lot of information that's being generated by every family member, and really what's capable out there, we can do a household level information, right? So understanding on a per household level basis, or we break it down to a community, we break it down to a postcode, we break it down to larger geography, because even using different ways inside data science, we can then extrapolate and understand where things are going in there with data intelligence. So go back to this community here real quick. When Cliff was talking about putting together the program with the building permits and layering map upon data layer upon data layer upon data layer upon a map, that's where this industry is going, because everything is property centric. Your MLS data needs to be on a map. All those data sets need to be on a map. It needs to be a property centric database where that 123 Main Street has information on the nearby train stations. It has information nearby on the recreation paths. It has nearby information on the schools. And as a practitioner, having that information on your hands is really what will allow you to do more in real estate, will allow you to sell more, because again, we're all here trying to grow our business. And using these tools will allow us to grow our business substantially, because again, we built this just based off of a personal need. We built this off of being at the kitchen table and maybe not necessarily understanding that this wasn't the right person to sign the listing agreement, or they were over leveraged on their property, or other attributes, like for example, they didn't get building permits for this addition. And this caused all sorts of issues inside of a real estate transaction, even seeing the title history as well too related to that property. So again, it's all about ingesting this data visualization, and having actionable business intelligence off of it in a simple and easy to understand way. And that's really where big data is coming into the real estate industry, where big data is changing our real estate industry, because this is coming. It's not here in the Canadian market just yet. It's coming. There's ways to get, there's a lot of information out there for the Canadian market, but this is coming right now. And it's rolling through the United States, and really where folks are seeing the adoption in this is that data intelligence, and also too using these data points to be able to say, okay, this is where I need to direct my targeting. Mortgage industry, real estate, financial industry, appraisal industry, they're all interested in these data sets on these properties, on these homeowners, and seeing this 360-degree picture of what's going on in that property, right? The owner, the occupant. So it'll be very interesting over the next few years. Obviously, there's challenges here in the Canadian market. There's privacy, but at the same time, there is ways to make this work. Like for example, I was speaking over in Japan. They're a very private country over there, like very, very, very private country over there. But there is a ton of data that exists, and the data that can be purchased on properties. So it doesn't matter that, again, nothing is being done against the laws. Everything is being done in compliance with the laws, so that we can get adoption and we can get usage amongst the practitioners. But the data points exist out there. Very quickly, we're working on Japanese proof of concept. We download all the train stations. We download all the rail lines. We're able to gauge how close is this home walking to the nearest train station, downloading property information. And then we started running some basic algorithms on it to understand about pricing and valuation, about where the market was going. Data exists. It's all about just bringing that data in, understanding the rules of the game, so to say, of where you can and cannot use certain data points, create those derivatives that allow the practitioners to have that unique insight and unique value about where they're trying to go in their real estate business, and then bring it more to fruition. So, questions, comments, suggestions. I'm open to it all. I know, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. So, come on, there's got to be, oh, there's a question right over, we got 2 questions over here. Hail Mary pass.
So, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so recently Facebook's been in a lot of trouble for their targeting advertising in terms of racial and religious demographics. And historically, Target in the States has also had similar issues, especially in terms of their neonatal targeted marketing. Are you anticipating something similar to come up in the real estate market in terms of consumers actually realizing how much data you have and taking umbrage at it?
Mm-hmm. So we've already had to cross that bridge because the problem is the computer doesn't understand race. The computer doesn't understand the protected classes that we run into in the real estate industry. And actually in DC, there's actually a total of 11 protected classes, which is appearance being one of them as well. So we've already had to run across this because there's so many data points about demographics. When you think about demographics, you think about age, race, ethnicity. I mean, just all these different things, right, that come into a demographic equation. And the computer is just looking for similarities. So what we've had to do is we had to strip all of those out. So when we build our algorithms, that they're purely looking at a square footage or a year built of the property, that they're looking at other attributes. Now, the argument can be made if they're looking at socioeconomic factors, that could then lead back to certain things. I think Facebook ran into something there that they probably, I know some data scientists and some marketing person, because by the way, marketers ruin everything for all of this stuff, said, oh, this would be great. Let's do this. And the next thing you know, they go through it and nobody said, let's go actually check some of the rules and see this, and now where they're at. So the direct answer is yes, you have to take it into consideration. We've already seen it. We've had to strip it out of what we do because that is a very touchy subject, that you have to stay very far away from. Mm-hmm.
Lorna Ham, director at CREB. I think my question follows Rachel's in that, do you anticipate a reaction from the consumer when you approach them and you know all this information?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not me approaching them, right? It's the, but my name is on the program, and the very interesting thing is that preliminary. This data exists a lot out there. So some of the data sets that we use are data sets used by debt collectors. And debt collectors are one of the biggest ingestors of property-related data as it goes to ownership and occupancy inside a property, because they're trying to find people to collect debt. So again, the data that's collected is not derived in any nefarious way. It's derived because there's a site that you went to and they said, hey, take a survey for us. And if you take a survey at checkout, we'll give you a $5 credit to your next order. That survey that you took ends up in my database because we buy it, origin source, from all those folks. Everybody's probably in this room has heard of Washington Post, a big media organization in DC. Jeff Bezos from Amazon bought them recently. Washington Post sells all your emails. When you sign up for a digital account, that email address will be in my database in about 45 days. And then I'll have your name and I'll have your address of everything that you provided to the Post. And I was like, because I read the Post, I've signed up for the Post, I'm like, I gotta go read the fine print. And it's in there. But how many of us are actually reading that fine print? And because I know, with like the castle laws that you guys have here, you consent. You are consenting by signing up with the Washington Post, providing that email address. It's buried in there, is that the consent to receive marketing pieces from affiliated industries. So it's definitely, I haven't been sued yet, right? So I think that's where you're going with that question. You get a lot of different things, but why we create those derivatives is to keep certain things out of the hands, like for example, marital status, right? We all in this industry have dealt with a divorce, right, and deal with 2 transactions, right? So for our industry, that divorce can be an opportunistic transaction, though it's a very sad one for the family that's going through that. We don't display marital status to our end users, but we know what the marital status is, and we use it inside of that derivative. So we don't tell the agent that, hey, this is why they want to sell in 2 to 3 or 6 months, but rather just to focus your marketing efforts here and let the natural sales cycle work itself out. You still have to sell. At the end of the day, you still have to have a script, you still have to show up, and you still have to sell. But this data will help you refine where you need to focus that sale on. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So in the predictive model that you had there, we had the heat map. Underneath that, is it trade secret, or what are the key drivers? I mean, it's more common knowledge than I appreciate, of doing that sale, because it's not like home ownership, length of home ownership is one thing, but a change of job would probably be a big driver of that. Maybe you can get that off LinkedIn. Someone changes their status, right? Can you share sort of some of the learnings about maybe some of the factors that are going in that aggregate data that's really driving it?
Absolutely. It's not reinventing the wheel here. Homeowners are human, right? It's human condition. We grow up, we get married, we make little humans, and we wash, rinse, and repeat. And all this comes down into a length of ownership question, an equity question, property characteristics question. But really, the reason that we're able to go into that using some multivariate logistic regression is we're able to ingest sale data for going all the way back to about 1995. So when we have that much runway, right, that we can experiment with and that we can test in any number of different ways. I mean, our bills that we use for our cloud computing, are large because we just keep running at it, and testing and refining, and then ingesting the new sales, comparing, training data sets, because that's the big thing in as in algorithms, is having a quality training data set. So we've created as well kind of a shadow data set that we use in addition to our core training data set to help test where some of these things are going to get to that level of accuracy. Now, am I going to have a 93% accuracy in Kodiak, Alaska? Probably not. Do I need to have a 93% accuracy in Kodiak, Alaska? No. If I can get you close enough and save you that time as a practitioner, then you'll be very happy with an 80 or 85%.
Okay, I'm Vicki Fairbairn. I'm with Royal LePage Benchmark. Quick question. What percentage of the practitioners in the United States are using the system?
So right now, we have this system rolling out to about a little over 100,000 agents. We deploy through the MLS only. We've had brokerages that come up to us and say they want to sign up, but we only deploy through the MLS, so that's kind of slowed our rollout. But right now, we have those 100,000 agents coming online as we speak, Alaska being one of them, which is why I'm very familiar with Alaska and some of their various areas. Recently, we were excited to have our local MLS come to agreement with us, which is about 45,000 members in of itself, and some other large Midwestern MLSs, as well, adding on. So we have those MLSs, and then now behind that, about another 200,000 signing up. So we expect by middle of next year that we'll have close to about 250 to 300,000 agents active using the platform. Thank you. Thank you.